Incense burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas.
Good afternoon. This is the most unusual path of instruction, I must say, because after 20 years of learning, sort of like learning the same things over and over, and getting some progress, but not getting to the goal, one begins to wonder if it is possible in, I say, this very life, but I mean, whatever life one is living in, whether that was 2,500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 100 years ago, last year, or right here, right now, one wonders if there is ever the possibility of awakening. And we talk about the Buddha of this world, Shakyamuni Buddha, and how, of course, he said that awakening is possible, but how many do you know that are? And so I think in some way we come to the conclusion that yes, we say it, but we don't really believe it. And because we don't believe it, we don't have, it's like believing a plane can fly and not knowing how to move it from being like a vehicle that rolls on a tarmac to a vehicle that can cruise on the nothingness of air. But it is possible to take that vehicle that rolls on the tarmac and to exercise certain mechanical movements that rely upon certain principles that are true and real. And like these principles supersede other principles that are true and real, like gravity is a principle, and you don't think that it's true, go up to a fifth floor and jump out and see which way you go. You won't go up, you'll go down because of the law of gravity in operation. But if you know something else, some other mechanical techniques, and you know some other methods of understanding the integration of the different laws of nature in operation in this world sphere, then you can make a vehicle fly. And I guess, I don't know when planes were developed, but before we had planes, I don't think anyone thought that we would have a vehicle that could fly like that and at that speed. Maybe hot air balloons or something like that. But even before we had hot air balloons, I don't think they thought that there was anything that we could have. Or maybe they made structures like that look like winged, birds, and they could go a little ways before they crashed and landed. But you see, bit by bit, we begin to discover more secrets of the universe. Not that they weren't always there. I mean, aerodynamics didn't just come into being because we discovered it and named it. It was always there. That law always there. But if you don't find it, then you don't know that it's there. And I imagine people thought it was silly, crazy, stupid, and deluded to think that one day we would fly across the oceans in these iron birds, and yet we do. So I say to you, you are limited in how far you go in this Dharma according to your own propensities and according to what you can imagine can be possibly true as shared by those who know. So those who know, there's a great deal of respect that is owed to them for just the very energy that they put forth in trying to overcome their own lack of their own skeptical doubt. I won't use the word belief in what is possible, because if the word belief throws you, and then you start talking, I don't want to believe anything. I want just the facts. I mean, you already limited yourself to what someone has finally discovered, not to what is at all. And so I talk about this a lot because you have to know that to make progress and to encounter these uncommon things, one has to drop off their common mind. Use your common mind for common things, but you can't use your common mind for uncommon things. So I'm looking at how Buddha Master is guiding me in this discussion, bringing us into concentration and meditation practices, and it's most unusual. Otherwise, I could have grabbed anybody's book off the shelf and we could just go through the book, but those have not really worked. And I think that what he's doing, because I'm getting a glimpse of it as I'm sharing it with you, is he's taking teachings from a state of something that we study to something that we walk out in all the aspects of our life. This bringing together, having a foundation for investigating something, but then one has to put forth the effort to realize it. He would say so many times, I can't cause you to enter into these sublime states. I can only tell you that they exist. And if you do these things, then you will awaken to them. So in keeping with Sunday, I'd like to go back and say something. And I'd been sharing for quite a few months, maybe 6 months, passages from Imparting the Absolute Truth through the Heart Sutra. And in my own notes, I was up around page 185. But as I was looking through my notes yesterday, I found something way back on page 35 that as we went through it, it seemed like this is the first time that I've heard this. And it was back on page 35. So maybe I missed something and maybe you did too. So I'm going to go back and catch us up around this issue. All living beings have the perfectly marvelous and perfectly bright, true mind Buddha nature. That's called intrinsic reality prajna, which is no different from what all Buddhas have. However, if living beings are to illuminate their mind and see their original nature, they must use the power of contemplative illumination prajna to illuminate the 5 aggregates and see that they are all empty. Otherwise, hindrances from myriad karmic forces will manifest. Where will they manifest from? The 5 aggregates. In the end, they will completely cover the bright intrinsic nature of living beings. These things that have been induced all day long will completely cover your original appearance, and that is your intrinsic nature. Why do I say this? Let's say you had a horrible quarrel with someone today. After returning to your home, do you still imagine that you can see brightness? Even when sitting on your bed, you will be flustered. All dharmas or phenomena stem from the mind. So what I'm saying is that worldly contamination will bring about karmic forces. And once that body karma is in motion, if the ear sense base hears something bad and one reacts by saying, that's terrible, that's terrible. If the ear sense base hears something favorable, one reacts by saying, that's great, that's great. This is how contamination enters and becomes a karmic force. This is a very real type of karmic force. That is what is taken in by the eyes and the nose and the tongue and the body and the mind, what is experienced by the 5 aggregates. These are the karmic forces being produced at this time. Additionally, there exist karmic forces that have been produced since beginningless time. Those are stored in the 8th consciousness. Other than our 6th sense basis, there's also the 7th consciousness, which is the manas consciousness, in which karmic forces enter, and then they enter the storehouse or the laya or the 8th consciousness. And when karmic forces are stirred up from this 8th consciousness, they become karmic hindrances. That's why you cannot possibly attain emptiness or even tranquility and clarity. With karmic forces bogging you down, you cannot see the Dharmakaya of the Tathagatas. Thus, you must cultivate yourself. So it doesn't matter how much time we spend in meditation, we're only going to hit a glass ceiling that if we're not equally cultivating ourselves. No matter how good meditation might make you feel, no matter how much in the moment it soothes the angry beast when one is upset, I got to meditate, calm myself down. Oh. And you can do that. And even if you just did that, you can settle yourself down in the moment. Absolutely. But does it mean that you are entering into meditation, which is a particular divine state? No, it doesn't. And so we will just keep hitting a glass ceiling. We can use meditation. Whenever I meditate, it makes me feel so good. Whenever I meditate, like everything gets copacetic. And that becomes our go-to spot. But you're just doing this, and you're coming back down to ordinary mind, ordinary action. Doing this, coming back down to ordinary mind, ordinary action. Being controlled and led by the senses, what we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and think. And so if we understand meditation as a particular state that one can enter that supersedes our ordinary capacity to really touch or come closer to our Buddha nature, if we don't understand meditation as that state that takes us beyond our ordinary capacity, then we will never enter into those states. We have to know it as something above and beyond. We have to learn of it as something that's more profound than simply calming ourselves. Or I think it's in Sutta number 4, 5, or 6, when the Buddha starts in the Majjhima Nikaya, when he starts talking about the disciples were boasting about how much they can meditate and how long they sit in meditation. He said, I don't call that meditation. I call that a pleasant abiding here and now. So he was letting them know we're not getting much beyond earthbound, pleasant abiding here and now. But if that's how we were introduced to it, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that pleasant abiding. And you can find that in almost any book that you buy on meditation, that pleasant abiding that has been brought down to our ordinary level. But he's talking about something that cannot be understood with the ordinary mind. Now, we didn't know that, because if we had known that, we wouldn't have been looking for it to be ordinarily understandable, right? And so he gives us some guidelines for how we should know things. He says one should take contemplative illumination, prajna, as one's purpose, using it as a fundamental guide and a specific direction towards becoming a Buddha. When living beings are in delusion, they're completely deluded. Once awakened, they reach understanding on their own. Now, one must rely on a master to cross over there, because there are different levels of awakening. And some people reach a low level, some reach a deep awakening, some see great brightness, and some instantly achieve transcendence, and some directly enter the state of realization. Awakening is reached through your own understanding. So if you haven't heard the high and lofty teachings, you've only grasped or been introduced to the low-hanging fruit. Your whole understanding of, or whether it's even possible to enter into holy states, will be limited. After you understand a certain truth, however, the depth of your understanding is your own matter. It will not be clear as to how deep your awakening is. On the other hand, if you're deluded, then you're completely deluded, and you can't see even a little bit of your original appearance when you are deluded. Thus, the sixth patriarch of the Chan school said, when I'm deluded, my master ferries me. When I am awakened, I ferry myself. I said that one should rely upon a master to cross over. You need a master to ferry you. This means that your master explains to you doctrine so that you will understand the truth. But after you reach understanding, you have to ferry yourself. You have to ferry yourself. And being deluded refers to not knowing that you originally have the intrinsic reality prajna that is no different than that of a Buddha. Someone wrote a book, and I think they titled it, "If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him." No, and it's supposed to be so clever, you know. But it sets up in the unawakened mind a notion that one's original intrinsic nature is not the same as that of a Buddha. You see what I mean? Yeah. So we have to be careful with our worldly cleverness. And there's a price to pay for being clever. All the ones that you dissuade, all the ones, you know, you have to be careful with the things that you say. So in summary, each of you disciples here has an original nature. Each of you has the state in which your prior thoughts have already gone and future thoughts have not yet arisen, and yet you have not stopped breathing. You have not died. You're not in a coma. Such a state can appear on its own at any given time. Why? Because you have it. It has never left you. It cannot leave you. It is just that without the right guidance to it, you will not know it. However, those with clear awareness know it. So the foundation that we're laying up here is that we already have resident in us the awakened nature, and that we're trying to allow it to come to the surface and to realize it. And we're looking to see what are our hindrances, what is keeping us from being able to realize it. First is not knowing that. So now no one can say that they don't know, because we found those obscure passages where the Buddha says that we can know. What I like about this is all of these things are in a little sentence here and a little sentence there in imparting, you know. And we like to study things topically, but then once we study them topically, we keep every topic in its own little section, and we don't know how to tie it all together, how to unify it. It's like having a body full of cells, and the cells are not communicating, the cells not working together. We've got all the cells that we need, but because they're not interfacing, you know, we can't make use of what we're learning. We just learn things, but we never come into the realization of it. And so he says that one reason why that is because we analyze. Did you know that they had two different names for the Buddha's disciples? Some called them the analyzers, and some called other disciples the happy ones. So now, which one would you rather be, the analyzers or the happy ones? Well, yeah, I take the happy ones, but there was something about analysis that appeals to us. What is that? It appeals to what? Our ego. It appeals to our ego, our ordinary mind, our capacity to rationalize and reason things out. So if I have a choice, I would rather be one of the happy ones. Mm. He said, I'm going to read you a little something that said about analysis so that you can decide whether you're one of those that like analysis or you like, reaching the same goal with like the path of happiness. And what the path of happiness is unraveling all of this through observing and contemplating things like an illusion. So you have analysis and you have illusion. It says, there is no time when the process of arising and perishing ever stops or pauses. So if there is no time that ever stops or pauses, you could say that there is no arising and there is no perishing. There is neither arising nor perishing. So now I tell you, this principle is profound. Without either arising or perishing, all dharmas are non-existent. From this, one can gradually awaken to the principle of emptiness, and this is called the observation of emptiness through analysis according to the Hinayana view. So it brings about a stoppage, if you will, of personhood, the emptiness of personhood only. Using this truth to awaken, striving for awakening, you can reach the state of a Pachika Buddha or an Arhat. This is the stage of insight of a Hinayana practitioner or a Theravada practitioner. I'm telling you this clearly. Only the Hinayana has such reasoning to enter the way of awakening. Some disciples here who are at relatively low levels have not even reached this view. Therefore, you should exert yourself, not to reach the Hinayana view of emptiness of personhood, but to transcend this view and enter the Mahayana state. Some people in this world who do not even understand the principles of Hinayana Dharma go so far as to call themselves reincarnations of bodhisattvas. And this is a sign of the Dharma ending age. So the Hinayana view is the emptiness of personhood or the emptiness of self, no self. And this view originates from the principles used to analyze emptiness, and it entails the realization of no self. So you can realize the emptiness of self through these practices. But in the Mahayana view, using illusion, one realizes the state of severing attachment to both a self and an attachment to all dharmas. What are dharmas?
All phenomena.
All phenomena, everything. So what do you think happens now when you're sitting in meditation and you have a certain view or perspective of what is happening at the present moment, and one is trying to reach some, we might call it altered state of consciousness, but we should recognize that in our normal waking state, we're in the altered state of consciousness, and we're moving towards the true state of consciousness, towards reality itself. What do you think happens when you're sitting there and you're in this altered state? How do you transition from the altered state to reality? Can you do it by rationalizing? Can you do it utilizing the same mind that creates your view of reality, which you even agree is deluded? That's a question.
No.
Mhm. I mean, really, it's a question right now I'm asking you to think about. So then the only way you're going to cross that barrier, you're not going to be able to analyze yourself across that barrier. That's what I'm trying to say to you. You're not going to be able to analyze into that state. So how will you get into that state? Letting go of what? Talk about it more. Getting there, but I mean, just straight talk, not Dharma talk, just straight talk. Because he's saying you have to use your own wisdom to get there. So we're starting.
Letting go of attachment to a separate self.
But how would you do that? Somebody who's been meditating for a long time, tell me how.
By entering into the principles of the Dharma and like thinking out a thought as it actually is. So changing your perspective to aligning it with reality.
Changing your perspective to align it with reality. That's getting closer to it. We're thinking, keep thinking.
Switching to awareness versus differentiation.
That's pretty good, but how would you do that? How would you be able to switch?
Stop thinking
Stop thinking what?
anything. Just be aware
Can you just stop thinking?
for small periods, I can.
Okay.
Not me. But I do, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it tends to work is, as I sit, my mind's always chattering and, just through the breath, I settle down a little bit, my nervous system settles down, it still chatters, but through the breath, I'm able somehow to not identify, or I can feel the pull or the tug in my body. Breathe through it a little bit, let go. And it's just this very slow, subtle process for me.
Mhm. So that's real good, Sam. And my question is, are you using your intellect to do that?
The breath in my body.
Kind of resting in an experience versus.
But what causes that experience to come into being? I mean, I've heard some of the words because we know the words, but I'm listening. That was the closest that it came to what the instruction is. I'm asking you to examine when you sit down to meditate. What faculty are you using to usher yourself in to what you called meditation? But now we know that meditation is a state that one reaches, right? It's not a practice. I want to know what you rely upon.
Contemplative illumination.
Those are words. What does that mean?
I would say the principles of the Dharma. So something that I read, something that's true. So like shifting the mind. So for example, like starting off and completely reminding my mind that this body is always going through impermanence. And so like going through actual language, that the mind can begin to understand that this is an elusive state, because the principles that I've been reading, principles that I've been studying, I can see that. I can start to see that, so then the mind begins to, slowly detach from this experience.
Of knowing yourself as a self entity, is that what you're saying? Can
Yeah.
detach from the experience of knowing yourself as a self entity because you are embracing and holding something to be true
Higher than this.
higher than this. Okay. Well, that's pretty good. Now I understand that these things are hard to use words to explain. So if you're struggling with words, that's okay. But what I'm trying to encourage you to do is to begin to use your own wisdom, because using the words of the Buddha won't get you in here. This is what I'm saying to you. Yes.
I honestly feel like, I feel my ego rising. Don't say anything, Nancy, because you'll be humiliated for being wrong.
Mm.
And that's just the truth, because I don't know whether I do things, quote, right. But I know when I say experiences, I'm not thinking, it's a body awareness for me that I don't feel like Nancy is.
That's a good way of explaining. Yes.
Hello. I think it's really easy to intellectualize all this, but I think essentially what we're really trying to do from the inside out is set up the causes and conditions to be able to enter into some place that's beyond the normal frontiers of our mind. And in the beginning, I feel like it's like if you put a patch over one eye, that's a radically different way to perceive the world. So just learning to tamp down the sense gates and then begin to see who we are without as much noise there. And then I feel like once we learn to do that, then there's a little more unbinding. My experience of this is that it's very much step by step, learning to enter into more refined states by surrendering, by letting go. You can't really, it's like when you hear people talk about near-death experiences, like it's terrifying, it's frightening because they don't understand the language of the experience of what's happening. And I feel like we are so conditioned to think we are this manifestation of ourselves. And so I think when we're setting to meditate, we're beginning to see glimpses beyond all that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable. The only word I can think of what I'm actually using would be intuition. It's not intuitive, and it's not intellectual. Intuition is the only word that I can think of to think of the skill or the thing that I'm using to actually truly enter into meditation. It's supported with breathing, it's supporting with kind of the practice of sitting and sitting upright and alignment and all of those things. But what's actually being used by my mind is intuitively, what do I need to do to actually get to a place where I am falling into a space of meditation? And that's not always the same. It's dynamic, depending on what's happening in my life in the day and the moment that I sit. So I can't give you like a process or say this is an intellectual exercise and I always do the process exactly as it's mapped out every single time, because I don't.
Thank you. That's very good. I might replace that word intuition with a kind of allowing, bypassing the mind's need to conduct. Oh, I'm sorry, you had your hand up. Wait, can you hold that? Remember that thought? Bypassing the mind's need to conduct or control this as an exercise. So intuition could be getting closer to what is our intrinsic nature emerging. And because we have no place that we can say where it really came from, because this false egoic mind can't identify it, we name it intuition.
Yes.
And that's getting much closer to having an encounter, if you will, with your intrinsic nature. And it's not really your intrinsic nature. There is the intrinsic nature, which is the Dharmakaya. And that's starting to come up. So a lot of times we talk about that being at the core of our being, and that's really not a most proper reference, because it starts to say that that belongs to us, rather than we are some manifestation of that. And if you can start to reverse the notion that I have anything, even I have an intrinsic nature. If one stops thinking that I have anything, but there is that, and that can be realized, it will let me know who this illusory I am, and it shifts our point of reference so that the I can fall away and one can traverse and go through the dimensions and have that encounter and that experience. And it's very difficult to talk about in words, but this is why he talked so much about how he, being the Buddha, awakened. On the night of his awakening, and when he gave the lion's roar, and he took us through the steps, and he said that it was through the mindfulness of the breath that he emerged. He came to this realization through the mindfulness of the breath. There wasn't any kind of thinking activity involved in what he was doing, except for at the very beginning. And so the meditation that is the quick path will take you to a jhana in no time, if your mind is conditioned in the right way. And our minds have unfortunately, through partial or erroneous teachings, the setup is wrong. And so we're breaking down the setup, just everything, to start over again. Sometimes we think like we had a property and we were like rehabbing and rehabbing and rehabbing and rehabbing and rehabbing. And I've come to the conclusion the best thing to do with that property is to level it and start from ground zero, start building from the ground up. And that will come up quicker than rehabbing and rehabbing and rehabbing and rehabbing. Okay, so this is what he said. He focused just simply on the breath. First, the sensation of the breath, the air as it was from outside the body to crossing over to inside the body. And you have to stay with that for some time. We want to, okay, I'm finished breathing. What's the next step? But just staying with that until there is nothing but that. We're not taking the inhalation and taking, oh, I feel the air going all down into my limbs, out through my fingertips. No, he said just where the outside air becomes inside. And if you could just take a minute and focus your attention right there, that one spot, no further. Keeping it right there on the exhalation and the inhalation. Tell me what happens. Don't tell me yet though. Just keep doing it. Don't try to control it in any way. Okay. Come on in. So tell me what happened and describe your experience. And whether you were even able to do it. I will I'll give a little bit of feedback.
Experience a loss of temperature differentiation between what I'm breathing in and what I'm breathing out. So it's like emerging when I first start, there's a very big sensation difference.
Okay. Anybody else? Any part of that?
This is Henry Coffey.
I'm sorry.
Henry.
Hi, hi, Henry.
How are you?
I'm good. Could you repeat what you said?
I haven't said yet. I'm washing the floor. I mean, when you sit and you concentrate and you breathe like that, when I do that, particular the grip of my sense of self diminishes,
Mhm.
and my being is still there, but it flows. The gripping diminishes, the gripping of self, the grabbing onto thoughts.
Mhm.
the thoughts don't stop. The illusion to the self doesn't stop. If the phone rang, I'd be, oh, something, I got to be an important person and answer this call. So at least none of that goes away, but the grip lessens.
Okay. So your sense of yourself as a concrete self begins to shift, and it's more of an illusory experience, right? You're not analyzing, cut me open, you won't find me. You'll find blood.
Right.
Cut
Just
blood and guts
become
open,
more-
you won't find blood and guts, you'll find, I don't know, corpuscles or whatever is less than that. Cut that open, you won't find that. And so,
that guy.
right. Okay, so that's part of an example of why we should not think in an analysis kind of way, but in an illusory way until everything that is hardcore, fastened, fixed, and concrete becomes more illusory. It starts to lose its definite edges. Something else about the breathing.
Was that pleasant or was that meditation? That experience?
Well, the experience could have been for you moving towards meditation, but the actual exercise was simply method.
Simply what?
And method, METHOD. And what kind of method? It was a concentration method. You're concentrating on the breath. And then something, I haven't heard what happened yet to the breath.
Well, something I noticed is like a smile, like a slight smile arises and a sense of like a narrowing and focus. Hello? Hello? Okay. I noticed like a slight smile and like a sort of like pleasant relaxation that it feels like. And then there's like a narrowing and a focusing that I experienced that then opens up to like a widening.
Yes. Did anybody else experience that?
The widening definitely happened because I felt my cord.
The sense gates, as focusing on the breath, they seem to harmonize, like instead of being pulled in all of these directions when we're engaging. When focusing on the breath, it's like a boat on water, where there's like a lot of waves. Usually when we're open and speaking and listening and talking, the water becomes still. So then the boat stops rocking, and then an expansion begins to happen because everything becomes harmonized.
So you can see that concentration, and we think of concentration as narrowing the focus, right? But something happens when the more we get close to concentration, the more there is then a vastness, and everything begins to be within the field of your in the field of your meditative experience. So it's not like the dog barking out there is disturbing my concentration or is disturbing my meditation. Suddenly the dog barking is all within your field and your context, because your field expands and nothing is outside of the field. But when we don't have that kind of concentration, then everything is disturbing to us, and the mind runs to everything. But when we get to that space that we narrow to a single point, it doesn't stop at that single point, it crosses over, and now everything that was outer, that disturbed, becomes part of the field, and it moves into a sort of like a non-discriminating, I think somebody mentioned it over here, a non-discriminating place. And so it's not like you didn't hear it, but there is a level that supersedes one of the five aggregates, or the five senses, So you hear it, but there is not a registration of it because one is becoming more single focused. And so now the differentiations are falling apart. And these have to be observed and known very clearly because they can be happening, but if you don't know they're happening, you're not able to use your mind to come into the realization of something. You see what I mean? So what I'm trying to work with you is to not have catchphrases, but to be able to know your own experience and see and know what is happening, because that's what you build upon. Brian?
I don't think there's a lot I would add. I'm just saying that there's a point in the meditation where all of a sudden there's a sense of clarity that arises. And it's a sensation. It's not nothing else, but just that there's a sensation of a clarity that wasn't there before.
Yes, yes. It's right now I've had eye surgery, and sometimes I'm looking at something and it's a little bit hazy, and then all of a sudden it will just self-correct by itself. And I just see crystal clear. I'm like, oh, wow. And like, I didn't like put drops in, I didn't rub them. It just sit there and it'll just correct by itself. And this is what continually getting into this space of non-thinking will do for you. It will allow reality to unfold and present itself. So you'll have the clarity, you will have the stillness. But this sister over here mentioned something particular, and she said it was a kind of a joy or a gladness that arose. So let me show you now the short distance between mindfulness and breathing. I think that's why the Buddha introduced it. We got lots of ways that we can do things, but why it's worth giving the method or what he used a try is because we know that one worked for him, and it just might work for us, but it seems too simplistic. But he just began to breathe. He said, just breathing, and there's 16 steps, but when you really get going with it, the 16 steps go like that. It's not like it takes you all day, half an hour. It's like, just like you're closing something. If I'm closing something, I might be going step, 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 step. But the more I do it, the more fluid it becomes until it becomes like that. And so he says, he gives the instruction for where the sawyer saws a log. Although he saws back and forth with breathing in and out, his eyes never meet, or his concentration never leaves the place where the teeth of the saw meets the wood. So I'm exhaling, but my mind and my concentration and my focus is just simply where it's moving from outside the nostril to inside the nostril. So what I feel or what I experience is a constant stream of air on at that one spot, at that one point. And on the exhalation, what I feel is not all with air all back here, but the constant stream of that one exhalation at this one spot. Did everybody do it like that? Who did not?
I don't think my mind settled enough to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Or this is what settles the mind to do that, because it like cancels out the thinking. So we're gonna, yes.
One of the problems I have is there's a sensation of my belly breathing interferes with my focus on where the breath comes in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that physical sensation that disrupts my attention on the point of inhalation and exhalation.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I'll say. Some masters teach using the rising and the falling of the abdomen, but how does that really connect you with the breath that is neither my breath because it's in me versus the air element that's outside of me? all of my sensation is within myself, right? So that's why I would consider the Buddha's instruction as opposed to one of those patriarchs a little bit supreme, because what's being destroyed is the simultaneously, as well as the focus being employed, is the dichotomy of inner and outer. And yes,
You described that, though, that his teaching brought him to awakening. And you described it and explained it very well. Earlier, you referenced 20 years and you wondered. So my question is, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I am.
I don't mind.
If that's so effective towards awakening and you know how to do it,
Why haven't I awakened? Oh, there's a whole lot more to this than just meditation to awaken.
but
Some of that has to do with the perfection, you know, the 10 parameters, the perfections of our cultivation and our behavior, having right view, exercising the right amount of energies. All of these things come together. There's no one thing, but one thing I can tell you, I can get far into that in my meditation. That's why I can go into certain states, because I have done good with this, and I'm trying to help some other people get there if they want to.
so that wasn't in and of itself what made him realize.
No, but within the topic that we're studying now, which is meditation, this is how to bring your meditation. Some people have a very strong cultivation. They don't do anything bad. You think of just living well. They're totally generous. They've perfected the qualities of being, but they are not getting anywhere in their meditation. Others are getting far in their meditation. They're going to get far, but they're not going to get to the goal, because meditation doesn't make perfect. Perfect meditation makes perfect. And I'm talking about why people don't get into these sublime states, these heavenly states, or don't even know that they exist. And so we stay in our mind with our thinking and our view, and we can't access the Dharmakaya. This is one of the reasons why, because the techniques have been altered, the ways of viewing and entering. Some are inferior. He says you can do analysis, but it's going to take you eons to awaken. But if you want to awaken, if there's a possibility of awakening in this very life, then he says, I'm going to give you the techniques for it. And we don't teach the Buddha's technique that much. We've come up with all kinds of mindfulness techniques, and they help people in their ordinary life. But we're talking about people who want to awaken to their intrinsic Buddha nature, because you can study with lots of people to be happier with your things, or to not have stress, or not to worry when bad things happen to you. But even after all of that, you're still gonna die. And then when you die, then there is the recycling through samsara again. For those who want to get off the wheel of samsara, who want to enter and abide in the Pure Lands, who want to come to the fullness of their Buddha nature, that's what I'm sharing now. That help.
That's a kind of hopeful thought, though, because unless a lot of these folks are hidden, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of them in history.
There are not a whole lot of them.
So if it's possible for everyone, how come so few have succeeded?
Maybe, what do you think?
I think it's extraordinary if it happens.
Yeah, but why do you think so many don't?
I don't know. It's like, the promise of heaven.
Could we be overcomplicating it? Truly, could we be
overcomplicating?
Yeah, really becoming awakened, and really, what does that mean? I mean, that we have moments of lucidity and being awakened and being very clear and insightful, and we know with our hearts what we need to do, and then things get muddy and it's process. And sometimes I wonder, a real idea, an answer, but sometimes I think we overcomplicate it.
So I won't say that we overcomplicate it. I think we underestimate the possibility, or we don't really think that we have the capacity to awaken. So that's why a firm belief or trust or confidence is important. You can't have confidence in the Dharma if you don't know the Dharma. And even if you know the Dharma and you don't live the Dharma, then you won't have any beneficial effects. So it takes all of these things. And skeptical doubt is one of the 5 hindrances. And so you have to understand that what is skeptical doubt, and one has to be willing to apply the energy to set aside skeptical doubt so that they can see, because seeing is what? Seeing is believing. Yeah, so if you're doubting because you haven't seen and you're not willing to try something so that you can see and believe, then you're really stuck in a pickle. And that's why ones who have skeptical doubt, it's virtually impossible for them to make progress on the path. Now, sometimes you can't, just simply because the karma is not there. The karmic conditions aren't right for you to be able to even have the desire to enter into it. If that's the case, no matter what is said, one won't have an affinity for that teaching, or won't take it up. But when someone hears and their heart is gladdened because somewhere deep inside they believe that possibility exists, that capacity is there, then one will hearken to it and one will apply zeal so that they can enter into it. And so, so it's important, two sides. It's not a debate. That's number one. It's like, I'm gonna give you the techniques. You can try them and see if they work. I don't mean try them 1 day, 5 days. I mean really investing yourself in the technique, not the one, well, I don't like the breath, so I'm gonna use the toe. You know how we like decide like what's better for me in our great wisdom, and I'm just asking, if you try something, evaluate what is happening, try it again, evaluate what is happening, and then you'll start to your own wisdom will awaken, and you'll have a firm conviction about something that comes from the inside and not because somebody read it to you. Otherwise, I could have just read all of this. But I'm saying, let's stop now and thinking about some things that he has said here. Do it and tell me what your experience, what's your actual experience. And then you'll start to know something about your own mind and about where these techniques and where these methods take you. But what has to be combined with that is, and I will say, you can't say, well, if it works, whether I have confidence in it or not. Maybe that's true around some mundane things, in our limited ways of perceiving what is true. But when you get into this level of engagement, where you're trying to move from being an ordinary human to awakening your Dharma nature, then it's going to take not relying on your own wisdom, but it's going to take positing yourself at the intersection of experience to know it as truth. And some of that depends upon, and I think that's the one caution about engaging in 2 or 3 or 4 different spiritual practices, because one may be taking you to the bullseye, but from the left. Another can be taking you to the bullseye, but from the right. And you can't be going in both directions at the same time. So sometimes something is said in various spiritual traditions, and they're all true, but it depends on which perspective and where you're coming from to where you're going towards that truth. And so we get confused in those ways. So I say, take up a practice and work with that practice. and see where it takes you. If you need a little bit of something else to see something from a different side, then hold that at bay, take up that one and see where that guides you. But when you try to run them all together, you're just gonna come away with a head of confusion. And this is about experiencing something, not thinking something. So I'm trying to take us from that field of thinking to simply experiencing. Something as simple as getting to the place, as Nancy said, that the distinction was broken down between the air, external, coming in, and the internal going out. But something happens when that distinction is lost. Something happens. You described
State of peace.
it's a state, the word she uses, peace. It's a state of peace. But there becomes no differentiation. Air is just air, whether it's internal air or external air. It's just air. And we are comprised of air, right? So this is one way of using the element of our own body to show us at a more more significant space of reality. We're air, internal air, external air, just air. That's breaking down a sense of solidity that I am me. I am Panarati. It's now there's just air. And as you continue to do this, you will notice other things that break down your sense of separateness. And now that finer material, finer aspect of you can begin to move through the dimensions. And that's how we move to higher and higher states of being, from a very solid, hardcore, I am me with my thoughts and my views and until we become more ethereal. We become more like an illusion. Matter of fact, the whole life becomes like an illusion, like a dream, like a bubble. And that solidity starts to fall away. When that solidity starts to fall away, now you're in the position that one can experience subtler and more finer aspects, universal aspects. And you'll start to see, I really am not just human being is a name that's been given to these aggregates coming together, but it's not, when I say a real thing, I mean, it's not a permanent, unchanging thing. It is constantly changing, constantly shifting. We're actually continuing to be here through this whole Dharma talk, through the exchange of just wind, internal wind and external wind. There's some other factors, but without this one, this primary one, we're kaput, just the internal wind. And when you settle in this way, everything that you held is so concretely permanent and important begins to waft away. And that's how the mind starts to change. So we talk about shifting the mind. So this is a means by which the mind begins to automatically shift. You didn't have to say, oh, stop thinking about something and get calm. It got calm by itself. And you are the recipient of it. Unless you were thinking. Were you thinking? I'm talking to Jim now. Were you thinking at that time, or were you experiencing through that exercise?
I was experiencing.
And the conclusion of your experience was the comments you just shared?
Excuse me?
The conclusion of your experiencing was?
The in and out of the breath.
Okay, but the conclusion, you asked some questions at the end. And I'm trying to get you to really reflect back. Were you thinking, or were you just experiencing the sensation?
Mostly experiencing.
Mostly. So then where did those questions come from the minute I cut it off?
Lifetimes. I have the same questions. I do. It's almost like,
So where does the thought come from?
mm, I don't know.
Okay, what did Buddha say? Where did those thoughts come from?
That technique appeals to me.
Okay, but where did Buddha say our thoughts come from?
I don't know, tell me.
Okay, so I did, as we started, talked about covered up from lifetimes and lifetimes.
That's what I said.
Okay. Okay. Keep working with it.
But he also, you were saying about that doubt thing, and I remember somewhere hearing him say, question everything. Don't take anything for granted. Right
So-
rituals.
So when you question, part of questioning is to actually put into practice the thing you're questioning, because that's the only way you're gonna know whether it's true or not. It's not just to hear something and question. But it's to hear if you come to a wisdom teacher, and I'm not talking about me now, I'm talking about the Buddha. You come to a wisdom teacher, you hear what he has to say, and then you put that into practice. And you use a lot of tenacity to put it into practice, not half-hearted, but putting it into practice to see whether it's true or not. Because he says if you put it into practice, you'll know that it's true. And so if you don't know that it's true, then you have to look and see what the hindrance is. So it might be one skeptical doubt. It might be that one didn't even realize that one was not entering into a space where the body was responding to just the instruction. You know, because if the body responds and you respond to the instruction, there are certain things that will definitely occur. And if it's not occurring, then that means that one needs to just keep working with that technique until it does. And they need to do it with their whole heart. And they have to ascribe some, I'll say faith or confidence that it works. I mean, like right now, I think you have confidence that what time is it? I think you have faith and confidence that in 5 minutes when we meet, that you can walk out this door, get in your car and drive off. And you're not questioning, challenging it. You're not doing any of that. You have confidence that you're gonna be alive in 5 minutes. You're gonna walk out that door, get in your car, and y'all gonna go to lunch. You know, so we can't say that we're people who have, question everything, because we don't question everything. We only question something that, you know, doesn't set right with us or hasn't worked for us or whatever. And so I say that so that one, you know, has to have a really intense interest in wanting to know the truth. If you don't know it now, don't hang on to your doubts, because your truth will never be found there. And I hope that that's helpful to you. We spend we don't spend a lot of time together, but when we spend time together, we spend a long time together with Jim. And we started this conversation a few days ago. So for me to see you sitting here today and on Sunday means that you're hopeful for a shift in your skepticism. And I think it's wonderful. So you just keep going the way you're going. You know, it doesn't matter whether you run fast or slow, as long as you get to your destination, right? Yeah.
I like that.
Okay, so let me go back to you all for a minute. The key is the right method of focus on the inhalation and the exhalation, because concentration requires focus, concentration requires energy. And in the beginning, it requires thinking enough just to be able to complete the instruction. Okay. So let's do it again. And this is going to be like just 30 seconds. Bringing your awareness and your attention and your focus to where outside air becomes inside air. Don't try to do anything funny with your breath, like a long breath or a short breath. Don't try to control it in any kind of way. Just noticing the length of your inhalation as it enters and the exhalation as it leaves. Okay, so now you only have to do it 3 or 4 times. What do you notice? And then you can even keep your eyes open and continue.
Magical.
It is. It's a very simple technique. Your relationship with this space changes. So it's a relationship with oneself that shifts, or our perceived self, a shift in the relationship in our environment, and a kind of contentment that begins to arise that really is otherworldly. Now that's how I experience. Somebody else can say what they experience. Stop, we're done.
When you talk about the saw going over the log, it occurs to me that I'm not so much paying attention to the breath, I'm just paying attention to the spot, you know. Is that wrong?
Well, if you pay attention to the spot, do you feel the breath as it moves across that spot? That's fine.
But I'm not feeling the change from in to out because it's going out for a while and it's coming in for a while.
So,
I'm not focused on the change, I'm focusing on.
okay, so I think the temperature in this room is probably around, and the temperature in our body is probably around 98. So the difference between air at 65 degrees and air at 98 degrees is going to be noticeable. So one should feel a coolness because the air is 65 or 70. One should feel a warmth because the air going out is 90, 95. It's been conditioned by our heat. So those are things that one would notice. I mean, it could help you to stay focused if you notice that the air is cool or if it's warm. You can notice whether that breath was a short breath, a short inhalation. I breathe out longer than I breathe in, or I exhale, what's the opposite? Breathe out longer. I exhale longer than I inhale. So I notice these things. I notice sometimes that my inhalation is kind of choppy, but my exhalation is smooth. But all of that helps me to just stay right here until I can develop the capacity to not let my mind run away with every thought that pops up, but I can just let it rest in one spot. And you have to do that until you can actually do that. It will take you to the next state. She mentioned the next state, and I think both of you did, and she did. Doesn't mean that everybody else didn't experience it, but the next state is with applied and sustained thought. So applied means you're bringing your awareness here. Sustained means you're keeping it there. Accompanied by piti and sukha. So one is sort of like a feeling of joy. That would be like sukha. And piti is sort of like the body feels copacetic, you know, so the whole mind body falls into a certain state. So with applied and sustained thought, accompanied by piti and sukha, one enters and abides in the first jhana. So he's taking us simply from concentration straight to first jhana. A very simple technique. And so I like to ask you, and the reason that he talks about this, and I'm gonna end, is because we have to shift our beginning ground and break down this notion that by so much analysis and use of the mind that we can enter into these spaces. They can be entered into, but our ordinary mind won't take us into that. Once we've had an experience, we can use our mind to figure out how rightly to walk out the flavor of the experience in our life and how we relate to others or how we speak to others or what we do for others or whatever. We can use our mind for that to bring the experience into our waking life. But if we try to do the opposite, like using our mind to create these experiences, we will never enter into them. So that was the key point for today. So kind of shifting how we have understood meditation as a thing, as a technique, and understanding it as a mind state that cannot be entered intellectually, but can be known, can be directly experienced. And this will cause you to not be so anxious, like I'm not getting to this place in my meditation. I'm not experiencing that. Because that's all in the field of mind. So it can seem like an outer skepticism, or one can have an inner skepticism, and that shows up as frustration that I'm not getting into a certain state, because I certainly understand it, you know. So one is an inner frustration, other it's the same as skeptical doubt, which will be a hindrance and you can't get in there. But when you think it's possible, it's attainable, I'm going in. If there is anything to go into, to enter, I'm entering, you know. And then just put yourself into that container to see what shows up. And you'll know you're getting there when the PT starts to arise and when the sukha starts to arise. Yes.
Fatima would like to speak. Go ahead.
Yes, Fatima.
Yes, hi, Venerable.
Hi.
I just want to share that the second time that we did it, what I noticed is that when the air was coming in, it was very ticklish. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna sneeze. And that made me think I'm gonna laugh. And that energy changed the sense of humor. It changed my energy. And it felt light, and I wanted to, you know, I just wanted to laugh. But I could not put words. When that was happening, just after we finished in US, and then I said, oh, that's what happened. I could go through the steps, but when that was happening, I was just in it. I couldn't feel it, but I felt calmer and yeah, like a little free, just free from whatever, that was holding me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so practice the next few days, just doing this. And I'm not saying a long time. 5 minutes. 5 minutes is gonna be a lot to do it correctly. 5 minutes is gonna be a lot. Just like maybe 3 minutes, like 10 breaths with that kind of focus is gonna be a lot. So do whatever, as many as you can. Do maybe 5 and then just stop and contemplate what just happened. What sensations did I feel? Where was my mind state? Do it when you're feeling good. Do it when you're feeling bad, like when you're perturbed or when you're feeling short or angry. Do it when you're happy. Do it in all of these different, as you're encountering different vicissitudes in your life. That's why I say do short is better, but following the technique and see how it gradually shifts your capacity to hold everything, because everything becomes more like a dream. This life becomes more like a dream. This momentary experience stops being the end all and the be all. There's a wider field of experience that begins to open up inside of you. So that's your assignment for next week, and then we'll talk about it. What I want to get away from is Buddhist jargon. I want to get away from Buddha words, and just really talking about the experience, what I experienced. Okay, that's good. Thank you for coming today. Will somebody offer dedication of merit?
The merit accumulated from this practice and teaching today benefit all beings. May all beings increase their fortune and wisdom, and may they always have peace and auspiciousness.
And when the sukha and the piti start to arise, the body just starts to feel good and the mind starts to feel good. You know that you're entering more completely, more fully into the experience. Okay, and then we'll go to the next step. Thank you.
Thank you.